Las Vegas, 9 stepping out of the back door of the Sands Hotel, Sammy Davis Jr. feels his hands shaking. 20 minutes ago, in a backstage area or a dark corridor, a man had given him two options. Both represented forms of freedom, but only one would come instantly. He touched the photo in his pocket, a surveillance shot of May Britt, the Swedish actress, a white woman. He was planning to marry her, and the mafia had found out. Frank Sinatra, his close friend, was sizing him up over a whiskey. Sammy could have told him everything. He could have told him anything. But this time he couldn't, because the threat wasn't just to himself. He needed Frank safe too. That night, Sammy took the stage carrying a secret no one knew, and that secret ate at him for the rest of his life. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay informed about stories like these. On the surface, Sammy Davis Jr.'s life in the early 1960s was the embodiment of the American dream. As an indispensable member of the Rat Pack, he danced, sang, and made millions laugh alongside Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. But the reality was far more complex. Every night at the Sands Hotel, Sammy received the applause of thousands. Yet when he stepped off stage, he couldn't stay in the luxury hotel. Because of the era's segregation, the hotel management didn't provide rooms for black guests. Sammy slept on the west side of the city at the Moulin Rouge, a modest hotel where other black artists stayed. In the morning when he returned to the Sands, he joked with his white friends, and before the cameras he performed the role of a man who was doing just fine. But at night when he was alone, he looked in the mirror and asked, would he ever be able to escape this hypocrisy? In late 1959, May Britt entered Sammy's life. The Swedish actress, with her blonde hair and blue eyes, was Hollywood's newest star. They met at the premiere of the film Porgy and Bess. That night, for the first time, Sammy saw something real in May's eyes. A lack of prejudice. May didn't care about his color, his religion, or his height. She saw him simply as a human being. For the first time, Sammy felt truly alive. But they both knew this relationship was a suicide mission in 1960s America. In 31 states, interracial marriage was still illegal. Even the FBI was monitoring and documenting such relationships. But love was stronger than logic. Sammy and May began meeting in secret. In the evenings, they met in a small cabin in the secluded hills of Los Angeles. There, no one knew them. There, they were just two people, a man and a woman, in love. In January 1960, Sammy proposed to May. Through tears, she said yes, but they both knew that once the news broke, the gates of hell would open. Sammy told Frank Sinatra first. Frank wasn't just Sammy's friend, he was his protector. Whenever someone in the Rat Pack pushed Sammy too far or made a racist comment, Frank was the one who defended him. But that day, in Frank's Beverly Hills home, when the marriage news was shared, fear appeared in Frank's eyes for the first time. Sammy, have you thought this through? Frank asked. Not just for you, but for May. Do you know what they'll do to her? Sammy knew, but it was too late. He was in love. And this time he wasn't backing down. In the first week of February 1969, the news leaked to the press. Headlines like Sammy Davis Jr. to marry Swedish actress May Britt covered the newspapers. The reaction was even more violent than expected. Some radio stations in southern states pulled Sammy's songs from the air. But the real danger happened where no one could see. In the 1960s, Las Vegas wasn't just an entertainment hub. It was an empire controlled by the mafia. Sam Giancana, who ran the Sands Hotel, was Chicago's most powerful mob boss. Meyer Lansky, who controlled the Riviera, was considered the brain of the country's organized crime network. To these men, Sammy Davis Jr. was merely an entertainer, an asset under their control. When the marriage news reached the mafia's tables, the reaction was harsh. A black entertainer marrying a white woman could make white patrons uncomfortable. and uncomfortable patrons meant less money. In late February, Sammy received a phone call. The caller was a man he didn't recognize. The voice was calm, the tone polite, but he said, "Mr. Davis, some friends want to talk. Tomorrow night at the Sands. After your show, come alone." When Sammy hung up, he felt his heart racing. He knew who they were. He knew what they wanted. But he had to go, because defying the mafia meant risking more than just his career. It meant risking his life. The next night, his performance felt different. Even when the spotlights brightened his face, a corner of his mind was dark. While singing, dancing, and smiling, he wondered how things would change after the show. When Frank Sinatra saw him backstage, he noticed something was wrong. "Is there a problem, Smokey?" he asked. Sammy shook his head. "Everything's fine, Frank." He was lying. He didn't want to pull Frank into this. He knew that the mafia could touch even Frank. At midnight, in a basement corridor of the Suns, two men were waiting for Sammy. Both were dressed in suits. Both spoke politely. But Sammy noticed the bulges under their jackets, guns. "Mr. Davis, could we have a minute of your time?" they asked. Sammy followed them. They took him to a hidden section of the hotel. Inside was a third man, older, gray-haired, with tired eyes. But behind that fatigue was a cold determination. "Sit down, Sammy," the man said. Sammy sat. The man tossed an envelope onto the table. "Don't open it. You can guess what's inside." Sammy didn't open the envelope. He already knew. Photos. Photos of May Britt in front of her house, shopping, with friends. "Beautiful woman," the man said. "Very beautiful. But in Las Vegas, some things aren't welcomed. You're black. She's white. This marriage hurts our business. People get uncomfortable. And when people are uncomfortable, it's bad for business. Who do you think you are to tell me what to do?" he said. His voice trembled, but he was defiant. The man smiled, a sweet, almost fatherly smile. "We're your bosses, Sammy. You work here with our permission. You sing on stages we control. And if you don't do as we say..." The man didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Sammy got the message. "What do you want?" he whispered. "Simple. Give up on this marriage. Forget May Britt. Move on with your life. We'll leave you alone. We'll even protect you. But if you go through with this..." The man paused and looked Sammy in the eyes. "Not only you, but she will be in danger. Do you understand? To protect her, you stay away from her." When Sammy left that room, a part of his soul stayed behind. As he walked down the corridor, he could feel his limbs shaking. Backstage, Frank was still there, whiskey in hand, his eyes searching. "Where were you, Smokey? I was worried." Sammy forced a smile. "Just a walk, Frank. I needed some air." Frank stepped closer. He touched Sammy's shoulder. "Is there nothing you want to tell me?" At that moment, Sammy wanted to tell Frank everything. The threat, the photos, the mafia's ultimatum. But he couldn't. He knew that if Frank took over, the situation could get even worse. Frank Sinatra was on good terms with the mafia. He was friends with Sam Giancana and acquainted with Meyer Lansky. But those relationships had limits, a line, and that line might not be enough to protect Sammy. "Everything's fine, Frank," Sammy said. "I'm just a little tired." Frank didn't believe him, but he didn't push. He left Sammy alone. That night at the Moulin Rouge, Sammy couldn't sleep. He watched the lights of Las Vegas through the window. Under those lights, thousands of people were having fun, laughing, dancing, but Sammy could see the shadows those lights created, and that darkness was closing in. The next morning, he called May Britt. He was nearly in tears as they spoke. "May, we need to talk," he said. They met immediately. What happened, Sammy? Sammy told her everything. The threat, the photos, the mafia's ultimatum. The phone was silent, a long silence. Then, in a calm voice, she said, Sammy, I love you, and if this marriage puts your life in danger, I'll give it up. But I want you to know one thing. If you give up because of fear, you'll never be able to look at yourself again. The man you see in the mirror will be someone who surrendered, and that's not the man I know. Hearing those words, Sammy felt a warmth in his chest. May was right. If he surrendered now, he would spend the rest of his life in the shadow of cowardice. But on the other hand, risking May's life, that thought tore him apart. In late March 1960, Sammy made a decision. The wedding was on, but not in Las Vegas, not even in Hollywood, somewhere far away, somewhere quiet, somewhere no one could find them. When he told Frank Sinatra, Frank was surprised. Are you serious, Smokey? You're defying them? Sammy nodded. Frank, my whole life I've surrendered. I laughed at every racist joke. I accepted every humiliation. But not this time. No, this time I'm making my own choice. Frank saw the determination in Sammy's eyes. And in that moment he didn't try to stop him. Instead he said, all right, but you're not alone. I'm with you, through everything. That was the day Sammy realized Frank's friendship was real brotherhood. Not just a friend, a brother by blood. May 9 Sammy and May's wedding date was set. May 11th, the location was a small church far from Hollywood. The guest list was limited. Frank Sinatra, Peter Lawford, a few close friends. That was it. But the final week before the wedding was a living hell for Sammy. Every day, he received death threats, some handwritten, some with clipped letters. If you marry, you die. We will kill May. Leave that white bitch alone. As Sammy read the letters, the fear inside him grew. But he didn't step back. Even the FBI had become aware of the situation. J. Edgar Hoover made a note in Sammy's file. Davis is a potential threat to public order. Monitor him. But the FBI wasn't there to protect Sammy. They were there to watch him. 2 days before the wedding, Sammy's phone rang. It was the man from the basement. You finally did it, Davis. Give up on this marriage tomorrow, or you'll regret it. Sammy hung up. As he held the cigarette, he realized his hand had stopped shaking. He wasn't afraid anymore. He had moved past fear. He had accepted it. Maybe he would die. Maybe May would be hurt. But at least for once he would be the master of his own life. Frank Sinatra was by Sammy's side on the wedding night. Outside the church, 2 security details were planned. Frank's men, to protect Sammy. But Sammy knew these men couldn't do anything against the mafia. If the mob truly wanted to strike, no one could stop them. But even as Sammy smiled for the photos, there was a darkness within him, because he knew this marriage wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of a war. The first week after the wedding, there was an unexpected silence. The threat letters stopped. The phones didn't ring. It was as if the mafia had disappeared. Sammy and May settled into their new home in Beverly Hills. Everything seemed normal, but Sammy knew this was the calm before the storm. And he was right. In June, Sammy's manager gave him the bad news. Sammy, your contract in Las Vegas has been canceled. The Sands doesn't want you. Sammy wasn't surprised. He had expected this. Why, he asked, even though he knew. The manager shrugged, official. No official explanation, but the rumors backstage say your marriage made certain people uncomfortable. Sammy smiled, a bitter smile. Certain people? You mean the mafia? There was no answer, but the look in his eyes said everything. Being blacklisted from Las Vegas was a turning point in Sammy's career. Las Vegas was the biggest show center of the era, the place that provided the most income. An artist working there earned a massive portion of their revenue. But Sammy had no regrets. When he looked at May, he knew they had made the right choice. Frank Sinatra was furious. He spoke with the mob. He called Sam Giancana. "Sammy is my brother," Frank said. "If you touch him, you touch me." Giancana listened to Frank, but the answer was cold. "Frank, we like you, but business is business. Sammy made a mistake. Now he's paying the price. If you get in the middle, you'll lose too." Frank called Sammy after that conversation. There was a sense of helplessness in his voice. "Smokey, I did what I could, but they won't listen. You need to stay away from Las Vegas for a while." Sammy replied with understanding. "It's okay, Frank. You've done enough. This is my fight now." By the end of 1960, Sammy Davis Jr. and May Britt's marriage had become a symbol in America. For some, a symbol of courage. For others, a source of hate. But for everyone, it was a topic of debate. Though blacklisted from Las Vegas, Sammy's career didn't end. He performed in New York, Los Angeles, and even London. But the shadow of that threat was always there. Every night when he took the stage, he searched for them in the crowd. The mafia's men. Maybe they'd come today. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe never. But not knowing was the worst scenario. May noticed the change in Sammy. He didn't laugh as much as he used to. The nights were more restless. Sometimes he would wake up screaming in his sleep. "Sammy, what happened?" she would ask. And Sammy would just shake his head. "Just a nightmare, May. Just a nightmare." But they both knew these nightmares were rooted in reality. In the early 90s, Chase, Sammy and May's first child was born. A daughter, Tracy. When Sammy held his daughter for the first time, he wept, out of both happiness and fear. Because now it wasn't just him and May. Now there was a baby he had to protect. And that baby's mother was white. As Sammy looked at his daughter, he wondered, when this child grows up, where will she feel she belongs? Black, white, somewhere in between. Tracy's birth opened a new chapter in Sammy's life. He was no longer living just for himself, but for his family. And the mafia's threat gradually weakened. As the years passed, interracial marriages became more accepted. In 1967, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that laws banning interracial marriage were unconstitutional. Legally, Sammy and May's marriage was now valid in every state, but social acceptance came much slower than the law. In 1968, May and Sammy divorced after 8 years of marriage. The official reason was irreconcilable differences, but the real reason was much deeper. The pressure had poisoned the marriage. Sammy still loved May, but alongside that love was a crushing guilt for putting her in danger, for turning her life upside down, for stalling her career. Because after marrying Sammy, May Britt's Hollywood career had essentially stopped. Producers wouldn't cast her. Agents pulled away, and May had accepted all of this for Sammy. But Sammy couldn't carry the weight of that sacrifice. On the day of the divorce in the courtroom, Sammy and May looked at each other one last time. The old love was still in their eyes, but it wasn't enough. As Sammy walked out of the court, he saw Frank Sinatra. Frank was watching him from a distance. Sammy walked toward him. "Frank, what are you doing here?" Frank shrugged. "I just wanted to be with my friend Smokey." They embraced, and Sammy cried on Frank's shoulder. "I did the right thing, didn't I, Frank?" he whispered. Frank nodded. "Yes, Smokey, you did the right thing. You always did the right thing." But there was one thing Sammy never told Frank. That night in the basement of the Sands, the mafia men hadn't just given him a threat. They had also given him an offer. If Sammy gave up on the marriage, they would give him $1 million. Cash. No questions asked. And on top of that, they would guarantee the biggest contract in Las Vegas history. 5 years, weekend shows, an astronomical salary. When Sammy heard that offer, he hesitated for just a moment. $1 million back then was a fortune. He could have lived the rest of his life in comfort. But then he thought of May's gaze, her smile, her touch, and no amount of money could buy that. "Thank you for the offer," Sammy said, "but I'm choosing love over money." The men were shocked, because in their world everyone has a price. But Sammy proved to them that night that some things were not for sale. Sammy never told Frank about this offer. He knew that if he did, Frank would have tried to stop him. "Sammy, you turned down $1 million? Are you crazy?" he would have said. But Sammy never regretted his decision. He knew that if he had taken the money, he wouldn't have been able to look at himself in the mirror for the rest of his life. Those 8 years with May Britt were the happiest and most painful years of his life at the same time. Happy because real love was experienced. Painful because the price of that love had been so heavy. But Sammy had learned one thing: freedom wasn't free. His freedom had a price, and he paid it. In the 1970s, Sammy finally returned to Las Vegas. The mafia was no longer as powerful as it once was. The FBI was conducting massive operations against organized crime. Sam Giancana was murdered. Meyer Lansky was sent into exile, and Sammy was finally able to take the stage freely. But a small part of that darkness never fully disappeared. Whenever he went to Las Vegas, he was haunted by that basement corridor, the faces of those men, the threats, and he asked himself, if I had made a different decision that night, what would my life be like? Easier? Happier? Maybe? But would I be more honorable? Never. Frank Sinatra met with Sammy for an interview in the late 1990s. Both had aged. Frank was 74 and Sammy was 63. The interviewer asked them about the Rat Pack days. Frank and Sammy smiled as they shared memories. The jokes on stage, the whiskey shared backstage, the golden age of Las Vegas. But the journalist asked a bold question. "Mr. Davis, you faced a massive backlash when you married May Britt in 1960. Do you have any regrets?" Sammy was silent for a long time. Frank looked at him, a sense of curiosity in his eyes, because Frank had never truly learned the full answer to that question. Sammy took a deep breath and said, "Regrets? No. Was I afraid? Yes. Did I pay a price? Every single day." Frank felt the weight of those words. He realized then that during Sammy's most difficult moments he was completely alone. Frank had tried to help, but it hadn't been enough. The mafia was something that had even been beyond Frank's power. 30 years later, he decided it was time to share the secret. "Frank, they offered me $1 million to walk away from the marriage. They thought because it was you, maybe I'd accept. But I didn't, because I loved May. And sometimes love is more valuable than money." Frank touched Sammy's shoulder. "I knew it, Smokey. I always knew. You were the bravest man, braver than all of us." The year 1990 İzmir'de final year for Sammy Davis Jr. Diagnosed with throat cancer, his body was rapidly failing. But a few weeks before the end, May Britt visited him. After 22 years, they were face to face again. May sat by Sammy's bed. Sammy's hand was now so thin, just skin and bone. May took his hand. "Sammy, I want to tell you something. Those years were the best years of my life. Yes, it was hard. Yes, we suffered. But I never regretted it. You showed me what love truly is. Real gratitude." Sammy smiled. He could no longer speak because of the cancer, but his eyes said everything. His look toward May was a thank you, a farewell, and a final confession of love. May kissed Sammy's forehead and left the room. As Sammy watched her go, he felt a sense of peace. He had made the most important decision of his life, and that decision had been the right one. Sammy Davis Jr. died on May 16, 19th. His funeral was one of Hollywood's biggest events. Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Liza Minnelli, Michael Jackson, Jesse Jackson, they were all there. But the most memorable moment was Frank Sinatra's eulogy. When Frank took the podium, no one could forget the tremor in his voice. Sammy Davis Jr. was my brother, not just a stage partner, my brother by blood. He was courage itself. He did things none of us could do. He took risks none of us dared to take, and we will always remain loyal to him, because he showed us that freedom has a price, and that people who are willing to pay that price can never be defeated. When Frank finished his speech, he went to the casket, placed his hand on it, and whispered, "Rest in peace, Smokey. You won. In the end, you won." But there was a detail at the funeral that no one knew. A letter had been found in Sammy's pocket, a handwritten, folded piece of paper. The letter was addressed to May Britt, but it had never been sent. It read, "My darling May, if you are reading this, I am gone. But I wanted to tell you one last time, you are the most beautiful memory of my life. Every moment, every second I could be with you gave me a taste of true freedom. Yes, the mafia threatened us. Yes, society turned its back on us. But I chose you, and that choice was the best decision of my life. I always loved you. I always will. Sammy." May received this letter years later from Sammy's daughter, Tracy. When she read it, she wept. She realized that Sammy had never forgotten her, and that love was stronger than death. Today, the story of Sammy Davis Jr. is not just a celebrity tale. It is a story of courage, a love story, and most importantly, a story of freedom. In 1916, a black man marrying a white woman was career suicide, social suicide, sometimes actual suicide. But Sammy took the risk, and that risk inspired thousands of people. But Sammy took the risk, and that risk inspired thousands of people. Ben just sold 12 people the shepherd serum. But my dear Sanjel Ekiniye, it wipes the Tulabionavilla, Onyxizler with sizes already. The certain belly story of Cortal, gain the church of Bola, Bakwa team Cortoto chat, Tabnaya Bakwa Tilana Bakwa Tuchel. And Sammy was the first to break that link in public view. The rice was heavy. His career took a hit. He was psychologically worn down. Even his marriage eventually ended under the weight of that pressure. But in the end, history proved him right. When the Supreme Court legalized interracial marriage in 1967, Sammy's struggle became one of the foundations of that decision. Frank Sinatra said of Sammy in a late interview, "People think I was the leader of the Rat Pack, but the real leader was always Sammy, because he did the things none of us dared to do. I lived in peace with the mafia. Dean drank and laughed, but Sammy challenged the mafia. He challenged society. He challenged the whole world, and he won. Maybe he didn't win immediately. Maybe in that moment it looked like he lost, but history gave him his due, and that is the greatest victory." Frank's words perfectly summarize Sammy's legacy. His struggle wasn't just for himself, it was for future generations. Today, interracial marriage is normal in America. No one is surprised, no one objects, but that normalcy was made possible by the price people like Sammy paid. The most painful part of Sammy Davis Jr.'s story came to light after his death. When his will was read, it was revealed that he was in a financial crisis. Over the years, millions of dollars had vanished due to spending, taxes, and bad investments. There wasn't even enough money to cover the funeral costs. Frank Sinatra stepped in and paid for everything. But this detail was kept secret for a long time. Frank wanted to protect Sammy's honor. "He was my brother," Frank said. "Brothers protect each other, in life and in death." And that was the final proof of Frank's devotion to Sammy. But Sammy's real legacy wasn't money. It was his courage. His story is still told today. It's taught in universities. It's the subject of documentaries. It's written in books. Because he wasn't just a singer, a dancer, or an actor. He was an agent of change. He was a man who challenged the system, conquered his fears, and risked everything for love. And such people are never forgotten. May Britt said in an interview years after Sammy's death, "When I lost Sammy, I didn't just lose an old flame. I lost a hero. Because he showed me what courage truly is. He showed me that it doesn't matter what society says or what the system dictates. What matters is staying true to your own truths." And Sammy stayed true to that his whole life. But those who visit that grave see more than just a celebrity. They see a legend. A man who challenged the mafia and seemingly lost but ultimately won in the eyes of history. There are always fresh flowers in front of the grave. No one knows who brings them, but they are always there. Maybe old fans, maybe the new generation, maybe May Britt. Because some loves don't even end with death. Some loves continue forever. And there is one more truth that Frank Sinatra never told Sammy. When Frank learned in 1916 that Sammy was being threatened by the mafia, he reportedly went to Sam Giancana and said, Sammy is my brother. If anything happens to him, I'm going to be on the other side." Giancana saw the seriousness in Frank's eyes and replied, "Frank, this is business. Don't get emotional. Sammy is hurting business. We're just disciplining him." But Frank didn't back down. "Then I'm making it my business, Sam. And my business will hurt yours a lot more." That counter-threat likely saved Sammy's life. The mafia didn't harm Sammy physically. They only targeted his career. And perhaps that was only because of Frank's intervention. But Frank never told Sammy. He didn't want to hurt Sammy's pride. Because Sammy didn't want to be protected. He wanted to be equal. The story of Sammy Davis Jr. is a story of shadow and light. The shadows were the mafia's threats, societal racism, and the pressure of the system. The light was love, courage, and the pursuit of freedom. Sammy lived his life in those shadows, but he never lost sight of the light. His love for May Britt was that light. His brotherhood with Frank Sinatra was that light. And eventually history giving him his due was that light. Today, his story isn't just a tale from the past, it's a story for the future. Because Sammy's struggle hasn't ended. The world is still full of racism, pressure, and prejudice. But Sammy's legacy reminds us change is possible. Courage can defeat the system, and love can transcend it all. Sammy Davis Jr. stood alone against the mafia in the 1960s. And in that moment, he stood not just for himself, but for millions. There are still millions among us who need Sammy's courage, and his story continues to provide that inspiration. As Frank Sinatra said, Sammy won. In the end, he won. And that victory belongs not just to him, but to all of us.